is underway in Irene, Pretoria. The NEC has not confirmed reports that it's already made a decision on President Jacob Zuma's future. The Lekgotla groups the NEC with the National Working Committee and the alliance partners, who include the South African Communist Party. Speculation is rife that the fate of the future of President Jacob Zuma now hangs in the balance. Last night, the NEC discussed the issue of his recall. Despite the matter not being part of the agenda, SABC sources have learned that it was raised from the floor. And after debating the matter, it's understood that the officials were tasked with the responsibility of managing the issue by engaging with President Zuma. There appears to be an agreement that by the time of the 2019 election, he should no longer be in office. The ANC is expected to clarify this matter upon conclusion of its gathering at St. George's in Irene outside Pretoria. And last night, the NEC also announced the decision to disband the Free State and KwaZulu-Natal provincial leaderships. The decision was taken in an attempt to forge unity within the party. And now to discuss these latest developments within the ANC, we are now joined in our Pretoria studios by political analyst Professor Somadoda Fikeni. Prof, thank you so much for joining us, and it's good to talk to you once again. Now, when you look at the situation in Irene, President Jacob Zuma is there and is now on shaky ground. His future now lies with the ANC top six. But the question is, can they come up, that is the top six, can they come to a unified decision on President Jacob Zuma's leave, given the composition of that top six?
Well, I do think that it is quite possible that they can come together into a common position. The divisions were there in December, but what was happening in Nasrec is not going to be sustained for too long. You are beginning to see some of the leaders transferring their support to the new president, because in politics, it is often said that there are no permanent enemies, there are no permanent friends, but there are permanent interests. In this particular case, it's conceivable that members have a consensus that it would not be possible for President Jacob Zuma to continue to be president of the country into the 2019 elections. So somewhere they may be debating the means and the ways of making sure that this transition is handled with all the sensitivity it deserves, given the sensitivities around the matter.
And talking exactly about that,
the president is also facing.
Yes, I was going to just add there, Prof, that exactly talking about that possibility. How soon do you think then that President Jacob Zuma may be out of office, and what will the top six really have to consider when they make that decision?
I do think that he may make some demands. Some of those demands may not be palatable in the new tone that ANC is trying to set, precisely because he's facing a myriad of legal challenges, commissions of inquiry, and possible impeachment. How soon will that be will depend on the negotiations and him being willing to vacate the office. But at the same time, it could prolong if he believes that it imposes existential crisis, given the challenges that he is facing this year in particular, because all the court cases that he has been deferring seem to be maturing this year.
And looking at the demands that you are talking about there, Prof, there are reports that amongst the major demands by the president is that he gets some financing or resources to fight the impending court battles, and also that have been in the other demands that have been in the public domain include that he is not humiliated and leaves office honorably. In your view, are these demands reasonable, and can they really be met?
I do think that it would be very difficult to meet all of them, because this matter has now gone into the courts, and the judiciary may determine whether the court, expenses are paid by the individual or by his office. That's the first thing. And ANC may simply send a signal that if duties you were performing were on behalf of government, and it can be demonstrated that you were defending government, surely that case is defensible, that you will have a legal defense, which is publicly or the state funded. But in the event where it is personal interest, they may find that position untenable. There might be no consensus over that. And with all other things, such as the benefits, they might turn it on its head to say, if you leave now and avoid impeachment, then you will be honorably discharged. But if you are impeached, then it imposes other legal challenges on how you are treated and supported by the state thereafter.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at the statements that have been coming out from people that are in Pretoria now, they seem to suggest that the president needs to be out at least before the 2019 elections. But when you look at the timeline, there are those that are suggesting that he may need to be out before the State of the Nation address coming up in a few weeks' time, and those that are saying he should be out before the budget. So when you look at the timing there, where exactly do we stand?
Well, there are divided opinions on that. Of course, ideally, ANC would like to see this particular matter resolved as soon as possible, so that the new tone, the new momentum, and the goodwill is not squandered. But there are practical political possibilities which make that not as easy as it is said. Therefore, it is quite possible, though not inevitable, that President might deliver the State of the Nation address, but at the same time, ANC would be aware of how opposition parties are going to attack the president, knowing that he is even in a weaker position now, and how they may try to humiliate him in the process. And all those are the considerations that one would be certain that are being taken into account.
Mm-hmm. And the ruling party also now has a new National Working Committee. When you look at the people that made the new list, what does it really tell you about the balance of forces or the balance of power within the ANC?
Well, I do think that, again, the effort to unite the contending sides, knowing that it was not a clean sweep in Nazareth, is expressed in this National Working Committee, just as it was the case with the top six. But the alchemy and the chemistry in politics will soon change over time. Where people were standing beginning of December in 2017 should not always be the yardstick that we measure them by, because some of them are beginning to show signals that they are transferring their loyalty to the new leadership.
And when you look at the factions within the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal and also in the Free State, where their PECs have now been disbanded, both welcoming that suspension. Now, what really needs to happen now as we go forward, and does this move then forge unity in the provinces for the ANC?
I do think that it creates, in the case of KZN, a possibility of unity, but very soon they ought to organize elections so that the testing of the legitimate leadership under the conditions that are transparent with a greater degree of integrity of processes is very important. And again, the vacation of people who have been in the positions of power in the Free State, in Gauteng, in Mpumalanga, those are very significant shifts in terms of the balance of forces within those provinces, because the sheer fact that after 2 decades and more, you had one chairperson of the Free State, and now you are likely to have a new chairperson and a new premier, will actually have some ramification as well. And the eyes will also be on the Secretary General as to how he manages that process without the temptation of trying to influence it in one form or another. But the possibilities of unity, if the leadership, the new leadership, keeps drumming that particular message, is very important.
And Prof, what then, in your view, should be an outcome that you expect from this Lekgotla if you are going to deem it successful?
I do think that if they give a clearer direction, as they seem to have done in places where the provincial leadership was disputed, and also have a roadmap for them as to how they create legitimate leadership in those spaces. The second one would be the one of making a strong input into the State of the Nation address, as well as the strategic direction of the country itself. That in itself also will send a very strong signal and emphasize the message that seemed to have resonated with the society: the fighting of corruption in all its form, private or public sector, the state capture or any kind of patronage, and deployment of proper and capable people in the state-owned companies and in the state entities in general, so that governance and strategic focus is the most important element that the country needs if it is to contemplate being a developmental state, or even developing the economy, attracting the investors, and creating employment.
And talking just about that, Prof. Fikeni, the state-owned enterprises, you may be aware we've been running a story throughout this afternoon of a major shakeup that is expected at Eskom, and this hour we now understand that a new board has now been put in place for Eskom. Now, do you see this as part of the strategy of the top 6 or possibly the NEC, and how does that factor in what the new leadership is trying to forge ahead for parastatals?
Well, I do think that if the new leadership of Eskom is appointed with greater influence of the ANC, and those are credible people with no checkered past, with no controversies, then it would confirm that the new leadership is asserting its authority. We've already seen the signal sent to the Ministry of Police when they finally cut the links with Mdluli, and they are beginning to talk of employing a new crime intelligence, because it was quite scandalous that you'd go for 7 years in the country where organized crime that needs the best crime intelligence the world can offer, that you have a leadership vacuum and you do have uncertainty and so many other happenings and shenanigans in that space. So that signal will go right across in the other state-owned companies as well. But that should come along with a thorough investigation of what went wrong in those spaces, so that you do not recycle the very same people who have caused damage, who now have to appeal to the taxpayers to bail them out.
All right, thank you so much for your time there. That was the political analyst, Professor Somadoda Fikeni, speaking to us from our Pretoria studios. And just to reiterate, the breaking news this hour is that a new board for Eskom has now been announced.